morning, everyone. Help if I'm muted. Thank you so much for joining us for our second Welcome Table Talk, proudly hosted by Wintergreen Women Writers Collective and Torch Literary Arts. My name is Mayron Price, and I am the project coordinator for the Wintergreen Women Writers Collective. Wintergreen is a 501c3 organization that gathers Black women writers in a literary community that seeks to publish, document, preserve, and celebrate their creative work. More than 70 women from all around the country have taken part in one or more of the Wintergreen retreats or programs over the last 38 years, coming to a place where they can do the sacred work of literary and cultural production. Wintergreen women are prefiguring a world where the history and legacy of Black women writers are honored and preserved, a world where Black women writers have access to intergenerational spaces where in community and mutuality, they can nurture one another and locate resources to support their creative practices, needed now more than ever. I have the honor tonight of introducing our moderator, Amanda Johnston, a founder and executive director of Torch Literary Arts. Founded in 2006, Torch is a 501c3 nonprofit established with love and intention to publish and promote creative writing by Black women. Torch publishes contemporary writing by experienced and emerging writers alike. Torch magazine has featured work by Toy Darracott, Tayari Jones, Sharon Bridgeforth, Crystal Wilkinson, Patricia Smith, Natasha Trethewey, and many, many others. Amanda Johnston is a writer, visual artist, and the 2024 Texas Poet Laureate. She has over 20 years of experience in nonprofit management and earned her MFA in creative writing from the University of Southern Maine. She is the author of 2 chapbooks, and her work has appeared in numerous online and print publications, including Callaloo, Poetry Magazine, The Moth Radio Hour, Bill Moyers, The Rumpus, and the anthologies Furious Flower, Seeding the Future of African American Poetry, and Women of Resistance, Poems for a New Feminism. She has received fellowships, grants, and awards from Cave Canem, Hedgebrook, Tasahio, the Kentucky Foundation for Women, American Short Fiction, and the Austin International Poetry Festival. She is a former board president of Cave Canem Foundation, a member of the Appalachian Poets, co-founder of Black Poets Speak Out, and of course, the founder of Torch Literary Arts. Tonight's conversation is the third in a series of Welcome Table Talks that will be held over the next 3 years. We at Wintergreen are so excited for this partnership with Torch, and we're looking forward to many more exciting conversations that we hope all of you will join us for. So without further ado, please welcome Amanda Johnston.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for that warm introduction, Mayron. It is so wonderful to be back here in this virtual space. We are so glad that you all are joining us this evening for what will be an incredible conversation, thinking about love and the divine with our incredible guests, DaMaris Hill and Ajanaé Dawkins. Allow me the honor to introduce them now. DaMaris Hill is a poet and creative scholar. Her most recent book, Breath Better Spent, Living Black Girlhood, is deemed urgent and luminous in a starred Publishers Weekly review. Hill's first poetry collection, A Bound Woman is a Dangerous Thing, is a powerful narrative in verse that bears witness to Black women burdened by incarceration. It was an Amazon #1 bestseller in African American poetry, but we know that just means in poetry, right? And it also a 2020 NAACP Image Award nominee for Outstanding Literary Work in Poetry. Hill's other books include The Fluid Boundaries of Suffrage and Jim Crow, Staking Claims in the American Heartland, and others. The next collection we can expect from DaMaris Hill is a memoir entitled Blood Bible, An American History, that will be published with Bloomsbury in 2027. Make sure you all bookmark that and be ready to pre-order that and get your copy. Similar to her creative process, Hill's scholarly research is interdisciplinary. She was a 2024-2025 National Endowment for the Humanities Fellow at the John Carter Brown Library at Brown University and a fellow at the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research at Harvard University. Hill is chair and professor of creative writing and English literature at her alma mater, Morgan State University. Ajanaé Dawkins is a poet, conceptual artist, and theologian. She works through poetry, visual art, performance, and audio to explore the politics of faith, grief, and intimate relationships between Black women. As a theologian, she blends cultural criticism, memoir, and theology as autotheory and consider the relationship between Black church history, spirituality, and creation. Her work has appeared in the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day, the Rumpus, Prairie Schooner, the Indiana Review, Frontier Poetry, and many, many more. Her chapbook, Bloodflex, won the New Delta Review's Chapbook Prize and is forthcoming in spring 2025. So it's already out and accompanied an incredible visual artwork exhibit. Do check out her work online at her website, ajanaedawkins.com. And with that, let's get into this conversation. Please welcome Ajanaé Dawkins and DaMaris Hill. Come on off that mute.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is an honor and a privilege to be in conversation with you. I'm so excited for our discussion tonight. You both have similar backgrounds. I want to start there with you were both raised in religious households, not just religious households, but households with religious leaders. How was your childhood defined by love and the divine? And how has it informed your writing, if at all?
For me, and I think growing up in an I mean, it was a religious household, but I also have to say I grew up in like the AME church, and that's like my culture. And the AMEs are slightly different. Our church was founded um because we had an experience with racism in the 1700s in a regular Methodist church. So the Free African Society of New Jersey and Philadelphia walked into church, and the good white folk informed them that they had to sit in the balcony. And they raised their little church finger and was like, "We're leaving," and started their own church. And so, from that standpoint, from the very inception of the AME Church, um, people involved in the membership were very socially and ethically engaged. That your Christian walk was one of stewardship and one of cultural belonging and protection. And so I learned about action oriented love in the church.
Who one, I love that. Um, Two, I love my AME kin down. I did not grow up in the AME church, and I was slightly jealous when I learned more about the like history of the AME church and AME tradition. Um, yeah, absolutely love that. Um, I grew up differently because I grew up apostolic. Um,
Oh, you were very hungry in church.
baby.
Church lasted a long time for
Church
you.
lasted a long time. You're a pastor's kid too?
I am, and my grandfather was a pastor, my uncles. My
Okay.
best friend from high school is now a bishop. She's like one of the youngest bishops ever. It's kind of crazy.
In the AME church?
In the AME church.
What's her name?
Bishop Erica Crawford.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Um,
Yeah.
um, because yes, I'm always looking for women bishops, but yeah, so I grew up apostolic. If you don't know, for folks who are listening who don't know, apostolics are like under the Pentecostal umbrella. And people, when they talk about Pentecostals, they love to talk about the Kojic church. It's Kojic this, Kojic that. The apostolics, okay, they are their own sect, if you will, within that. So also my dad was a pastor, my grandfather was a pastor. We were going to my grandfather's church. So my family had a church in Brooklyn, and called Second Chance Ministries. Um,
ends up transitioning, and now the church still exists under a different name in New Rochelle. But the central idea for the Pentecostal is really about the presence and power of the Spirit in the now. It's around, the idea that the material experience of God is one that we are having now, and that God is not, in theory, but the power comes over you in this space. And for whatever deviations I now have from some of the theologies that I was raised with, that was really formative for me. And so when I think about growing up in a divine space of love, I feel like love was shown two ways, which that I still cling to. One, so in Hanif Abdurraqib's There's Always This Year on Basketball and Ascension, he talks about growing up like Muslim and feeling like he got the easier end of the stick because his friends who were Black Christians used to be at the church all day, all night, Friday, praying up and down. He was like, and I felt like I just got off easy with my little 5 prayers a day. And I think about that as this kind of source of love. Like I grew up where I'd be sleeping and it would be my father would be setting alarms for 3 a.m. My grandmother setting alarms for 3 a.m. to wake up and intercede and pray on my behalf. And I think about when you exist in certain traditions, the laborious and time-consuming effort of considering somebody in your spiritual practice. So waking up to oil dripping down my head, and at the time I'm frustrated, but the heart posturing of like I set alarms to wake up and pray into the night for your safety and for your future and for who you are going to become, which I always have. I still to this day, no matter who is praying for me, I think of that as like such a radical act of love for somebody to take this very precious finite resource that we have and to pray in faith, to meditate on something that has nothing to do with them, but something with me. And so I think about that. And then also I think about love being shown through rebellion, kind of, in my family. Like my family's very traditional, conservative, old school Pentecostal, but my dad was a rapper and he believed hip hop was a vehicle for the gospel. And that was at the time, we're talking pre-Kirk Franklin, you know? So that is radical in this space. And my watched my grandfather also go to bat for my father in the denomination to say, yeah, what he's doing is also evidence of the love of God, is also evidence of the gospel. And so that willingness to also break tradition, even as I continue to break tradition, and that includes its own tensions, was a sign of love for me as well.
I want to think about that because before you brought that up, and maybe we are of one spirit and a line, I was thinking about without church, how would I be introduced to the liberatory aspects of love?
Mm,
Like, even though, do not get me wrong, respectability was paramount in the
mm,
AME church, but luckily I knew how to read for myself.
mm,
And the Jesus that I read about was very radical, instrumental, communal, and liberatory.
mm,
So the soon enough, the respectability just faded to the side. That was like ornamental
mm.
in terms of what um Christian and religious walks really meant.
That's it. I want to interject there because you both said some really incredible things. An action-oriented love, DaMaris. Ajanaé, you talked about considering someone else in your practice. Like I'm seeing like a service-oriented love, right? But oftentimes when people talk about love, at first they'll start thinking of romantic love and relationships, if we say the big L word. But y'all are talking about that more divine, ineffable love, right? What does love mean to you? Yes, I'm seeing that the agape sense of love. What
Mhm.
does love mean to you?
I don't have enough words for it. Even as a writer, I don't have enough words for it. I mean, I have seasons, and right now I'm trying to understand my commitment to loving someone even in their different transitions and exceeding the expectations that I have for them, and even in spaces that I may not enjoy. Like, what does love look like there that's not challenging, that's not combative, but big enough to hold space? And until the non-consecutive walk is over. What does that mean?
Can I ask what you mean by non-consecutive walk? I'm deeply
Like
involved.
when you're not aligned with someone, right? So I'm thinking about it in many senses, and I kind of hinted toward it in my last poem, but really like thinking about loving my mother not on a physical plane anymore as she transitioned into whatever space she's occupying next. And then loving, like, what does it mean to love in totality? Like loving even the rigid and hard parts of a person without being in conflict with them. Like, I think that's a real challenge for a person like me who believes that conflict is the path to resolution. um, like conflict is the ignition point to resolution in my life. So what does it mean to kind of become surrealistly active in my love? Not because I'm afraid of losing anybody, not because I want to prove that I'm a bigger person without any of the ego, but to try to live in that state. I don't know if that makes sense. Don't pay any attention to me if it did not.
No, that's right. I was thinking when, I was pulling these questions together, I was also thinking about Nina Simone. We've all seen that interview where she's asked about what is freedom, right? And her response was, she said, I can't describe it any better than I can love. But you know it when you feel it. And then she came back around to, I know what freedom is, no fear.
Yes.
So I would then equate that as well to love with no fear.
I agree.
What does a love look like that is absent of fear?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm chewing on so much of what you said. And you, Amanda, too, because I've been thinking a lot about the function of fear and what it means to be in spaces. I'm in therapy, y'all. So like to be in spaces, that active conversation I'm having is like, what does it look like to feel afraid and to press forward and to make a decision within the context of that fear when I can't do anything necessarily about that fear. And so I appreciate you saying that. I'm thinking about what you said, DaMaris, and also about conflict and to move without conflict. And I kept thinking like of how critical conflict is to love for me, especially divine love. I think about like even the idea of wrestling with God. Like I feel like I am in constant conflict with God, and I don't know that there is any way not to be, because in many ways me and God are on in moving in different, not in many ways, in every way me and God are moving in different directions. We don't share the same like way of being, and that has created a deep sense of conflict in my relationship with the divine. And so in that relationship, I'm constantly negotiating the space between love, adoration, and efforts toward alignment versus a very deep and kind of valid conflict that I feel. I get really excited. I get really excited about certain theologies, and I feel like they give language for me. And so one of some theology stress me out because I'm like, what does that even mean? And some of them I'm like, oh, okay, yes, that, all of that. And one of them is thinking about God existing outside of time, because for me, so much of love is about commitment, right? And is about a decision to be with somebody in an active way. And for us, it is usually I am committing to love you in the versions of you that I haven't met yet that are coming. So I'm not just committing to this version of you. I'm committing to the version of you 20 years from now who might look very different, which means that our relationship is always alive. And the idea of God existing outside of time for me, meaning that God knew every version of me and then decided to engage in love, feels like a reaffirming of that possibility that I can love multiple versions of somebody, meaning that love can be sustained like across time, even as those people or relationships change. I think about the leap of faith that requires. Um, and I think I also rely like just very deeply on the idea that love covers a multitude of sins. I don't remember who it was that said like if you're 99% known, you're unknown. And like what spaces in my life have am I fully known and still covered? But let me tell you, my best friend Brittany, Miana, they done seen me through some raggedy mess, you know? They done seen some versions of me, that were not their most illustrious, where I was not even behaving in the ethics that I proclaim that I profess, to believe in, and where I was, causing harm to myself and by proxy other people. And what does it mean for me to then be loved on the other side of that, and for somebody to say yes, and I still believe in like the totality or wholeness of you. So those are the things I'm thinking about.
Isn't it amazing? I've had a lot of therapy too. I've had like 7 years of therapy. And I do kind of have a warrior spirit with me. But
Mm.
even in my friendships, in all of my relationships, familiar relationships, that warrior shows up. And she may have been a terror. Like I met one of the foundational church ladies in my life when I was campaigning for my best friend's bishop race. And the first thing she said is, "You were terrifying."
Mm.
And I was like, "What?" She was like, "Adults were so afraid of you." And I had to think about, the warrior being present and embracing conflict at a very young age as the path to relationships. Like
Mm.
conflict was just a part of it. And
Well,
it
and
was,
that doesn't have to be violence. That doesn't have to be anger. I often, when I'm thinking about my service work, right, and how I have a creative activist artivist practice,
mm-hmm,
it is deeply rooted in a fierce love. I say
yes.
fierce love. And so that comes out, that's where the fight comes from, because we have to know what it's all for, what's on the other side of the conflict. And
Mm-hmm,
it's so that we can get to the peace, so we can get to the love, so that we can be there with each other on the other side, so that I can bring my people, make sure we all make it to the other
mm-hmm.
side. That comes from a very fierce love, right? So for my artistic practice, that's very much at the center and the root. I'd love to hear from both of you how that type of fierce love, and also something you said, Ajane, about loving your multiple selves
Whew.
in that work, right? So I think we learn a lot about our divine practices, known and unknown, through our creation, right? And we have to do that work here first. You both talked about, therapy and doing that self-work. That's beautiful. Not that long ago, that wouldn't have been a conversation we'd be having in a public forum like this, right? So that's testament to the growth that many others did with love that started for self, and then sharing that externally so that we could all benefit from that model. So how does your fierce love, how does your radical love for yourself work its way on the page or through your other creative practices, so that then it might model for your readers, for your followers?
So I'm gonna start because I am lusting after Ajanaé's shirt. She has on her Whitney shirt, and you should have called me because I would have put on my Whitney shirt. And
Connection.
yeah, and we could have been there together. But in Breath Better Spent, I was thinking about, as Ajane said, ignoring time and space, and thinking about the fluidity of my Black girlhood and my action-oriented love expressed in my writing, channeling my rage into the writing and bringing her with me into this space. And as I was exploring my own Black girlhood experience, primarily in New Jersey, of course, I was thinking about Whitney Houston, a Black girl who's probably been at work since she was 3. Tisha Campbell. There are a lot of Jersey girls that have been at work a long time. Tisha Campbell has been at work since she was about 3. Aretha Franklin has been at work all of her life. Lauryn Hill has been at work for a long time. And I was just thinking about what some people call the armpit of New York, which is northern New Jersey, and how many of these Black girls have been at work and supporting families, and their Black girlhood is not pastoral, or may not have the amount of room um, to, to escape the consequences of errors. Um, and I wanted, in love of my niece and my nieces to come, and my granddaughter who is not yet conceived and already loved with everything I have. I want their, when I write, I'm thinking about those people and what I need them to know to survive this place called America that has created a social and cultural hierarchy that may not protect them. I think about it every time I invest in ink and paper. And Living Black Girlhood, Breath Better Spent Living Black Girlhood was a part of that conversation. And ignoring time was a huge part of it.
What is the quote? I'm writing for the girls who, y'all know I'm butchering this quote, who aren't even born yet, so that there's something here for them when they arrive. You know what I'm talking about? Whose quote is that? Oh, now I'm gonna look it up in a second.
Okay.
That is that is what was playing in my head when you said that. And again, thinking about like love moving beyond time. Cause yeah.
I love that. I want to bring this up because this was another point, and y'all touching on it a bit, like through sisterhood, like and our foremothers too. Women, Black women have been writing about the infinite spectrum of love. And I do feel like that is a nameable work, but it's how we survive, how we get over. Who would you say are the love practitioners in this literary thing we do, that have been inspiring you and that you follow? Who are those who are writing about love that you look to?
I'm gonna start. The first one that came to mind, the first person that came to mind is Zora, because we don't think of her as a loving person, But when you read her autobiography, like Dust Tracks on the Roads, which very much influenced me, is she she devotes 9 chapters of 22 chapters to her Black girlhood.
Mm.
So who was she thinking about,
Mm.
right? And she makes it a point to talk about how she avoided American literature because the Black girlhood that she had access to in American literature was pretty much Topsy and Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Mm.
And she didn't find herself in that. So I think about that, and I think about in Their Eyes Are Watching God when Janie buries I'm gonna say his name wrong. I'm gonna say Joe, but that's not his name.
Joe Starks or
Yeah, Joe Starks. When Joe Starks dies, the first thing she does is she runs up to the mirror, she rips the head wrap off her hair, and she says, she went to greet the girl in the mirror. She told her she'd be back for her.
Mm. Mhm.
You know, after
Mhm.
she got finished serving this very public, obligatory duty of being a wife. I told you I'd come back for you.
Mhm.
And that was the first person she wanted to greet after whispering all the evil she could into Joe's ears before he died. You gotta love Zora for that good shade. And then after he passes, going to greet herself, the self that she had to leave behind in order to be his wife.
One that is 10 out of 10, one of my favorite books of all time. Love looking at it as a romance coming of age, not just romance toward the culmination of her relationship with Tea Cake, but romance to the self. So yes,
Mhm.
we are here, eye to eye. Out of
Definitely.
10. Um, I'm gonna toss in here Pat Parker and Audre Lorde, specifically thinking about their letters to each other. Me and Brittany Rogers taught a workshop together at one point based out of those, and it makes me think of a few things. Well, I told you I'm Pentecostal, so we just gonna have a little Pentecostal moment. So there is this, she's like a Christian ethicist, and is it Ellen Ott Marshall? No, Ellen Ott Marshall's Prophetic Imagination. I have to go back and look at her name, and I don't want to misquote her research and her theoretical work. But essentially, she has this theoretical framework where she's talking about the demonic and how, in the Pentecostal space, we think about the demonic as something that possesses the individual from like one individual to the next. But she's talking about the demonic as something that is a systemic issue. So she's saying when the Bible says or when faith says you are born into a world of sin, what they are saying is that there are systems, demonic systems, capitalism, okay? These systems that are established before you get here. And from the moment that you get here, these systems are making attempts to seduce you. And you can either be seduced, give in, say that, yes, okay, I am going to adopt these ideals and then cause harm to my fellows. And essentially, she refers to that as like demonic possession. Or I'm going to resist those systems, even though the resisting of those systems might crush me in other ways. And I say that to say there is this letter portion of those letters, and I'm probably butchering it because it's been years since I've returned to it, where essentially Audre has reached out to Pat Parker because they both have like a gig, and essentially they're like supposed to be reading together or working together, and whoever has reached out to them has tried to like undercut Pat and has tried to like underpay her, do something so that Audre would receive more. And Audre's first thing is to reach out to Pat and let her know, hey, this is the kind of foolishness they're on. And there is something about being able to say, I love you so much that I refuse and resist the seduction of the systems that we were born into, even when it means that I will not prosper, or I might not prosper as much in a system that is like built to kill me if I cannot prosper in certain ways. Because we don't know what that extra amount of money would have meant for her. And I think about that, and I think about how that has shown up in my own relationships. Last quick story, because I know I'm a certified yapper, but like me and Brittany, when we were going into our MFA program, Randolph was a new program, and we both needed scholarships. And the previous year, one person had received the scholarship. And I remember me and Brittany really literally went into that program holding hands, praying. We applied and we were like, we're just going to pray we both get the scholarship. We don't know how it's going to work out, but that's what we're going to pray for. And we did. They then that year, which we didn't know at the time, that they opened up 3 scholarships. Me, her, and another Black femme ended up getting that scholarship. And so I think about the my literary foremothers as like having always set the example of like nothing is more, there's no system that's more important than like the love and care that you show each other.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, yeah. So shout out to Zora, shout out to Pat Parker and Audre Lorde.
Ooh, the shoulders we stand on, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
The shoulders we stand on, and who are in us. I do feel that when we are engaging in everything in this world, that's part of the divine for me, is that connection, right? Like, where do I stop? Where do you start when we are all coming from this same place? You know, it's like root systems on trees. We might stand individually, but we're all connected, right? And under the earth. So both of your books, your most recent Blood Flecks, Ajanaé, your chapbook, and DaMaris, your forthcoming Blood Bible and American History, both have blood in the title, and that really moved me, that correlation there. And I'm curious if you think at all about blood memory, like what is in us from before,
Mm-hmm.
um, and how that is then inspiring not just your creative writing, but also your psychological and physical present to be able to do that work. It's like, I know this ain't just me moving my hands. I know this air didn't just conjure up in me because my lungs wanted to go up and down, right? There's a whole lot that had to be at work for me to be here. And I feel it. Again, how Nina said, I can't describe it, but I feel it. Do y'all have any thoughts around blood memory in this work? It's like,
The way I even got to my title, Blood Flecks, is because I had been writing about my mother, writing about my matrilineage for years. This is like the third version of this chapbook. And at some point, I had to have a real ethical conversation with myself about the way I was presenting the idea of inheritance. And, that's something that's really um, has been a through line. I can't speak for the like wider white mainline churches, but in the Black church, I feel like I grew up with the constant rhetoric of like we are breaking generational curses and you are breaking chains off your bloodlines. And I was deeply immersed in the idea that inheritance was something that I had to free myself from, as opposed to something that I was receiving. And so then in that lens, when I wanted to write about what I had inherited from my matrilineage, everything that my lens, my pen was pointing to was a wound. Um, and I ended up writing this poem, Blood Flecks, because I was like, okay, we have to start to break out of that. I ended up writing this poem, Blood Flecks, that was literally in kind of thinking about that of like, what does it mean to not view the blood through the lens of the generational curse, which is a lot of the church-based language that I had heard, but to think about it as its own kind of adornment, as its own flex if I have nothing else on when I walk into the room. And so for me, that kind of blood memory had to be rediscovered, and I realized how little I have access to view based on the narratives I believe, when all I had was the narrative of like, oh, all this trauma that I've inherited, that was all I could see and that was all I could write about. And then I was able to move into a better, much clearer space, and then connecting this, slightly to an earlier question that I didn't get a chance to answer, but I also, there was an internal work for me that was required because I was writing about my mom, And getting grown gave me a much deeper empathy for my mother. I was young, and at 15, 16, like many young girls, I hated my mom. And that came from a not great place. But what refined in me getting earlier was being able to be gentler with her, and also that coming out of a product of my relationship with myself. And there was ways that I just could not show my mother empathy and forgiveness and love because cruelty was a normalcy in my own mind toward myself in the mirror. So when I went to write about her, it was not with this love spilling over. So I think that my poems are always a reflection of that. Um, of the internal spiritual work that's happening, especially because I'm carrying or preserving narratives of my family.
I'm gonna try to talk about this. So Blood Bible, the title came to me pretty early. When I thought about my life, the AME church is so present in my life. It's the reason my parents know one another. The oldest friends I have in my life and in my family, the multi-generational friends, are because of the church connection. The people that I know across the globe are usually tied with the church. So I thought about all of the ways that the Bible connected me to people. And then what I also have is the blood that accompanied the Bible, right? And in Christianity, we always talk about the blood of Jesus as like a purification or a type of Eucharist, right? But I thought about like the literal inheritance of the blood of empire. Like my body is an archive of war, of violence, of capital, of expansion. My body is a story of forced migrations over the past 500 years. And I wrote Blood Bible constantly asking myself, how do you define home in the context of that? I plan to do just a little bit of family research and history in Blood Bible. And the fellowships that I had with Harvard and with Brown were such a gift to me. Some of my, I would say some of my ancestors that I can identify through DNA were people that were enslaved from New England, indigenous peoples that were enslaved from New England, and forced to migrate to Bermuda and other places in the Caribbean, where they built families with Africans, right? Some of my oldest DNA on my father's side can be traced to Austroasian and Filipino peoples, which means that the people that illegally traded my African ancestors in the 1500s were probably also invested in the East Indian slave trade. So what does it mean for your body to be an archive of capitalism? It takes you back to the blood in the Bible, because those things have been present in each of those spaces. Like the history of the African slave trade is in my DNA. Each space. So when I was in those archives, I found each of my family names that I know in English tongue, because I don't know the other tongues, in the archives before 1720.
Mm.
What does it mean to see your family names on the incorporation of slave trading company documents and charters as initial investors? It means this blood in that Bible. I think I should stop there because, well, I want to say one more thing. In the midst of all of that research, some of which made me very, very sick. Like there were some days that I left that archive with a fever induced by what I had learned and read. Migraines. Sometimes I went home and I would have to like literally be in the bed for like 3 days from what I had deduced in those archives. But one day I was driving to the archives, and on my drive in, I try to listen to something to make me happy. And when I'm writing, I have an affinity for vocalists like Whitney Houston and power vocals. And so I was listening to my good Stephanie Mills, and Never Knew Love Like This came on, which we know is like the sexual liberation anthem and like a good finger popping disco R&B song. And like I'm singing it at the top of my lungs because I enjoy Stephanie Mills so much. And then I just start crying profusely as I'm driving because I realized what my ancestors endured so that I can occupy this time and space. And I also acknowledged fully that I may not have had the courage to do so. And at that moment, in that instant, it was just like a conversion. Prior to that moment, I thought I couldn't love anyone with the amount of love that I love my son. After that spiritual conversion, because there's no other way to talk about it, love became equal. I love my ancestors as much as I love my futures. That's it. There's nothing to talk about. We are all on one continuum. We are all here together. We are all present. There is no hierarchy in that love. And I think that's what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about the term blood Bible and when I'm thinking about the divine presence of love. Like you loved me, not even sure that I would exist.
Right.
You loved me enough to endure things that I couldn't imagine. And I'll leave it at that.
Absolutely. We've all heard, that they're saying, in my ancestors' wildest dreams. I've started to take it on for myself, and would ask others too. So if you are your ancestors' wildest dream, what is your wildest dream and how are you honoring the growth of that dream that was planted in you?
Absolutely.
Right?
DaMaris, you
Is
got
it,
me ready to throw something at you. Stop playing.
how are we honoring that fierce love? Right? Because we definitely, especially, I mean, when you're doing the research, as you said, it embodies the physical. You can't carry that kind of history and it not be heavy, right? But then the flip side of that coin is, and yet we're here,
Yeah, we're here.
and yet we're here, right? So with that, I'm gonna ask one last question, and then we're gonna open it up to audience questions. Thank y'all, audience, for rolling with us for this incredible conversation. I know you have questions. Please put them in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, that button. Drop those questions there. But my last question for y'all: what advice then do you have for those who might be grappling with their own connection to creative expression of love and the divine?
The anxiety is going to be there right through it. It's going to be there right through it. Right through it. You'll have time to fix it and edit it later. Just get it all out. And it was Audre Lorde who said, never stop somebody from creating because you never know where they are in the process of the creation. The person you think is a bad poet might not be a poet at all. That person may be a dancer, and the poetry is a way for them to get to the physical, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right through it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, mine would just be keep wrestling. Because there is no, I think especially in engagement with the divine, engagement with God, I think that one of the lies that's been sold to us by fundamentalist religion is that God is an answer as opposed to a question. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's this deep unsettling and feeling like you don't know. But almost all of our engagement with God is centered in the mystery of not knowing, of something that cannot be confirmed in this space outside of experience. And so I the more I went to and got a whole degree, degree in theology, and left more confused than I arrived. Like many of us do. I was like, I went there thinking I knew something and I left knowing absolutely nothing. So that the wrestling is a part of the process. There is no arrival in that. It is just growing to be more comfortable with questions that for the for what's honest, you likely will not on this side of heaven get answers to. And what does it mean to live a life dedicated to questions that you might not get answers to? And it's not a unique experience of somebody wrestling with the divine. Theoretical physicists spend their entire lives dedicated to one question. I think theoretical physicists are just theologians with math, but that's just me. But
They are.
they are okay. Thank you. That they are. They
We
just
used to call them alchemists.
Thank you. And that's if I get started on how a lot of people think they doing something, and I'm like, baby, that's just theology with recipes. I love you. But I'm not I'm not gonna tell you about your stuff, but I'm just letting you know as somebody on the other side, we asking the same questions. We just get into it different ways.
Regulated spell work.
Okay?
Whatever.
Baby.
I need that on a t-shirt. We need to put them on some bumper stickers. But truly, I think for me, with regards to that, the question is the divine. That the question was planted in you. As human beings, like that's how we scour this earth full of questions. And where did that come from? We could just be sitting there eating whatever was there, and we're eating this and we're procreating, we're doing that. But to question the thing,
that
to
and
be on a path of discovery and curiosity, I think for me, that is to engage in I didn't put it in me, but it's there. And then the creativity, the writing, what starts to come out, I didn't put that either. I would argue with any artist that any artist worth they saw knows that when they sat down, the best ones didn't know where they was going, but what they were doing was being obedient to what was put there, and say, let me follow this and question this through, and then the answer arrives in the process of the work, which is the questioning and discovery. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That part. The last thing I'll say on this, because this just triggered that, is so like even thinking about the story of Babel, right? This biblical story where this, people are trying to reach God and God confuses everybody as this origin story for how we get languages and how we get access to language. And so God, when the tower gets to a certain point, God gives everybody a separate language so that they can no longer understand each other. Like my theological interpretation of that is that actually everybody like had access to all language in the same way that God does, and that fracturing was just saying you will no longer have access to all language, so that you will never fully be able to name what is inside you, so that you will always go searching outward. You will always be in search of this thing that you are unable to name somewhere else, and hopefully in turning to the divine.
I want to add to that good sermonic scripture right there. And I want to bring in I believe it's Genesis 28 and 29, which is some of my favorite piece of scripture. And God says, you have dominion over all the earth and anything you can name. So even when I'm at a lack of words, I may use a morpheme or a made-up thing to command what is in my life. And I encourage those of us that are writers and those of us that are listeners and those of us that just may need a little bit more clarity. God has given us the power. If you believe in the Judaic Christian tradition, to anything that you can name that you have authority over. That's how powerful language is.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you both so much. We're going to turn to some questions. Thank you for filling the Q&A, audience. The first one I see here, to continue on that theme, what makes you choose to stay close to the divine?
And I can't even find it, but there's a scripture that's essentially somebody being like, where else would I go? And I've had my faith wrecked in some real ways. I've been at some points like, dang, it's gonna be real embarrassing when I come out as atheist, okay, after I'd have been publicly aligned with my faith in these ways. And I definitely have a sense of to whom else or to where else would I go? Um, and I think that there's a way that my faith keeps me connected to um, a metaphysical reality that I don't know how else I access, because I don't feel committed to the fundamentalism of Christianity. But when people talk about the God of Abraham, I'm thinking about my grandmother. I'm thinking about the God of Dorothy.
Exactly.
And a way that I there's a way that I will continue to turn back there because um, I won't say because I don't know anything else, because I have explored, but because that is what has been foundational for me in some ways. Um, and and I think that there's something specific about, and this isn't specific even to Pentecostals because this is common in a lot of Black traditions, but the idea that God is experiential, and there's a way that becomes when you've had certain spiritual encounters that becomes difficult to shake because then I have them all the time outside of church. I had an encounter on a walk at a Beyonce concert and a poetry slam, and so it makes me then be like, there's something at work in this moment for me beyond just a secular idea that I feel like I can't get away with. It doesn't matter if I could have not been to church in 2 years. I was recently, can't wait, I can cuss on here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
I was recently throwing ass with somebody in the back of the club. We get back there, start talking about Jesus, start start crying, okay? And I just feel like I could have not been in church in 2 years, and somehow this I feel chased down by by like a metaphysical encounter of God through relationship or through the world. And so I there's nowhere else for me to go. And every time I think I'm going somewhere else, I run into the wall of the divine by way of spiritual encounter.
Yes. I'm gonna say something far less beautiful. Um, at the very least, what religion did for me in my life is provide a technology to negotiate the reality that I was fed.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality that I was fed offered very little protection, very little agency, a whole lot of fear. And religion offered a different technology and a different consciousness and a sense of agency where there was no other. So, at a very practical level, if religion does nothing else for me, I'm grateful for the times that it was a technology to an alternative technology to help me negotiate this reality that I lived in. But I want to also say that there is okay, let me not say it like that. In my 20s, I kind of had this coming out to my parents. And so I used to always explore a lot of different religions. And then in my 20s, I decided that I was Gnostic, not agnostic, but Gnostic. And I believed in this kind of ancient religion. And I was trying to practice it in my own intuitive way, that the more you know, the more that you're like God. And so I just started to ingest and read and try to get a greater understanding of God in different forms in different religions. And so I'm a little Christian plus. Everybody in my life knows that, and they deal with it like, uh, my mom, who was probably my biggest critic, took like a week. And then she came back to me with a list of names, because she's also an ordained minister, with a list of names of people that were also Gnostic. And she was like, Martin Luther, she came through with some other people. She was like, I think you're going to be okay. And then that was the end of it. They got over it. Since then, it's been little evolutions, but, for the most part, the more I know, the closer I get to God. Now, I might get knocked off my Tower of Babel. I don't know. But
I love that. I'll add this one. I was raised in my aunt's church, Southern Baptist, as a child. And so, for me though, it didn't come from in my house still. It was my aunt who I did not live with. I mean, I almost lived with. I was with them so much. But it came first from a loving, a place. We love you. Come be with us. We're gonna. It was like if I was gonna spend a night with my cousins, I knew what I had to the toll I had to pay for that was church. And,
yes.
and I would keep trying to get out of it, but nope, you going to church. And so I would go, and so at the end of it all, it was love, the divine and love that were one. I was here because I'm fiercely loved, and I don't understand what's happening, but I know people who love me are here and are bringing me here, right? And then as an adult, much like you, DaMaris, shifting in and out, different consciousness, so too smart for my own good. And I wanted to control. And that started to become my thing. Oh, no, I'm not really religious and I can explain things. I can figure things out. And this comes from here and it's related to that. But then things would still happen that I did not have an explanation for and that I could not reason away. Why is it that I was about to fall off the cliff and that didn't happen? Why is it that, I found myself in this situation through no fault of my own, and then this and this and this and this happened in perfect timing for another way to appear, right? And so now, at this good age where I am now, like I said, I struggle with that word choose, because whatever I call it, spiritual, divine, folks who know me will often hear me say it's above me. It's above me. And that's just my rep to all of it. It is above me. Is love in action, just said earlier, an actionable love, service love. I do my work, but then so much is above me. And and so for me, it is a practice of releasing control and having faith.
Oh,
And
faith is huge.
where that is going to take me.
Yes.
And that I think is what more people struggle with, whether you call it religion or not, but knowing I have done my work and I have faith that where I'm at is going to still be, it might not be where I wanted it, but it's still exactly where I'm supposed to be. Like you said earlier, DaMaris, don't disrupt the creativity. That bad poem might lead to a great dancer. Barack talked about his bad poems in college. And he was the president walking around with Walcott under his arm.
Right.
it takes us different places, right? But having faith that you are still, as rocky and wild as it may feel, you are still on the path that was laid for you.
Yeah.
And you have to follow that through. All right, y'all, let's get to another question here. Is genuine love by luck or personal effort or divine intervention or destiny?
All of the above.
I would say eat all of the above. And if you ever experience genuine love in whatever form it presents itself, consider yourself blessed.
Yes.
Yes.
10 out of 10. Yeah. I think I have this conversation all the time about the epidemic of loneliness. People who do not have genuine relationships, genuine friendships. I'm not even talking about romance, just people who love them without love them like as they are for their full selves. And I think that there's so much intervention. I've been very lucky to encounter the people that I have and to have gained the relationships that I've had. One of my best friends, Miana, that is like our relationship is so spiritual. If her nose start running in Chicago, I'm gonna start clearing my throat, okay, over here in Columbus. And we have always felt like that relationship was divine. So yeah, all of the above.
Did you want to add anything, DaMaris?
Yeah, that's all I have to add. Like if you are in a society where your life has a capital value down to the minute and a second, if you experience genuine love in any form, you are blessed because the environment does not reward that.
Yeah.
That's all. You're blessed.
You are
Acknowledge it.
blessed. You're blessed, and acknowledge all of the love, because sometimes we get caught up in, again, as the earlier part of our conversation, romantic love being the first definition of love. And they'll say, well, if I don't have a romantic partner, then I don't have love in my life. But you got 100 people who are holding a fierce circle of love around you, who are feeding into you, who are pouring into you. A dear friend, incredible, not surprisingly, pastor and poet Marvin K. White said something that stuck with me years and years ago. He said, love me showing up. Love me showing up.
Absolutely.
So whenever I'm, in that place, darkness comes to all of us, right? And will distract us from our work and our relationships. And if I start feeling lonely, and like, oh, I'm not loved and no one's there for me, I ask myself one thing. It's 3 o'clock in the morning on the other side of the world. Who's coming? Who do I know I can call and just say, I need you? Or not even call. They'll call and say, something don't feel right. I'm just checking on you. And we have those people, right? Be clear and name who those people are, because that is still no less love in your life.
No.
That is love. Accept that blessing. Accept that love. And sometimes that's the question then. Why is it challenging to accept love? That'd be a whole nother hour. So
That'll be a couple of days. We'll be months talking about that.
Listen, I was thinking that. I said, I grew up in the Black church. This ain't enough time, okay?
Not enough time.
Right? So we got a few more questions here. Thank you for putting questions in the chat. I'm trying to summarize this one to the last portion of it. But the question then would be, how do we help expand the younger generation's access to the ways and how we portray love in popular fiction? So,
well, one, I want to say this with so much empathy for the young people in my family and my life. The propaganda and percolation, for lack of a better word, of hate has existed seemingly for the whole lifespan of people under 18. And it is polluting their minds. It's creating a perverse sadness. because there's little space in the popular culture for them to see or even hear or ingest stories of love. And they may think that the love that they feel in their household or among their families is isolated, and that the world is devoid of love. I don't know how we can overcome that with it being so perverse, with that negative and hateful narrative being so perversive right now. But I'm really, really trying. I try to gift my young people books that show a balance of love and negativity, you know. But I sincerely empathize. Maybe I don't have a solution. I just have empathy.
Yeah, the babies are definitely going through it. Probably, I saw some other parts of that question I was talking about, like how book talk has brought a resurgence of things. Um, and I think I think that oftentimes young people don't know how what they're engaging with is actually it's so many derivatives of something that started like a long time ago. And we do this even with music, where my baby sister is putting on, what is that child? Sexy Red. Okay, Sexy Red. And Young Glow, who I rock with Glow, who's
I'm a
putting on
global.
listen, I'm a Glow girl, okay? Gloria, hallelujah, that's the prophetess.
Mm-hmm.
But and I'm like, I'm over here having to take her back to Little Boozy just so she can know that, baby, this is my generation, or this is, where this thing originated. I don't know exactly how the culture is going to continue to shift, but I think showing young people like the derivative things of like, okay, this is where you have, but this is like where this thing came from, um, in terms of fiction. And other than that, I don't know that I have a full answer. Like, I think that some of this is something we're going to move to naturally, because I think we're going to really, and we already are seeing fatigue with technology. And
Mm-hmm.
the cool things, um there's a really keen awareness of how much has been lost to technology. And so I think naturally we are going to see in a generation people turning back to things that are not about an algorithm or a trend, but that are timeless and that are these like classics. And like I said, we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing these with this resurgence of dumb phones, of people are trying to go back to landlines. Like, people are making an attempt to return to the last time they felt real, genuine interaction
Mm-hmm.
and intimacy
Yes.
and knowing. And so I don't know other than to encourage those efforts as you see them, and to be an active
I,
participant.
w- I want to add to that, because in thinking about it, right, I think when I was talking about trying to be in a different space of love, the larger story is, the warrior will always be with me, right? But in a space of so much hate, and knowing that I do not have the ability to weaponize the news, I don't have the ability to weaponize propaganda. I have to kind of engage in some type of guerrilla warfare.
Mm,
So, what my strong opponent's weakness is becomes my weapon. My strong opponent lacks love. I need to know everything about love. Ooh, in every way that I can weaponize it, so it's just up underneath his rib cage and in his lungs. You know what I'm saying? I need to know everything about love. I need to know how to teach the people that I love to weaponize their love in this space where hate has so much currency and such a large highway. That's where we need to be. We need to be in the brush with love. We need to be in the clouds with love. We need to be in the sun with love. It needs to be like inescapable water, and so yeah.
And have faith in that process that it will get to them, that it will touch them. I'm here on this other end now. I have 2 daughters and they're grown now, right? And if there was one thing, among many things that a mother tries to do, but I wanted to make sure that they knew without question that they were loved. And again, mothers and daughters. So with both of them teenagers, there was moments where I know I wasn't their favorite. And Lord knows I had to hit my knees and take a breath to keep their love I have for them up front before anything else. But now, on this end where they're grown, I see that seed that was planted with faith and how it has grown in them. That now we're to the place where they walk a little taller in my absence in their own lives. And whenever they are threatened or come across anything that is challenging to them, one of their first response is, well, I know my mother loved me. I'm gonna call my mom. I'm gonna call my parents. I know I'm loved. And there's just something that stiffens your back and makes you ready for whatever may come when you know you have love, that you are engulfed with love. So yeah, I think that is the practice. That's the showing up part. So if you're seeing the negative impact and influences that are being pushed out there with intentional, practices and looking for intentional outcomes, none of that is passive. Then you have to also be intentional with your showing up in love. And it can just be, Ajanaé, you say, I don't have the answers. That what we say, where do the questions come from? Are we asking the children questions? Are we asking, what'd you read? Oh, you don't know what to read? Well, let me give you something. Oh, you read that? Tell me about it. What happens in it? Let's talk about it. How'd you feel about that? And you know what I'm saying? So keep just in showing up and engaging with questions so that they know they're not alone. Because when they feel alone, that's when they're turning to these artificial spaces, to these virtual spaces, because they don't feel they have anywhere else to be engaged, that anywhere else is looking for them. We can't be okay with the young people being locked up in their room, being locked over here. We have to go after them. And what Baldwin say, the children are what? All of ours. All of the children are all of ours, right? Ooh, y'all, that brings us to our time. I want to say thank you so much, DaMaris here, Ajanaé Dawkins. Woo, I feel we was at church. That was a sermon. Oh my gosh, my cup is full, my well is full. I'm leaving with so many more questions, and ain't that a gift? And ain't that a blessing? Thank you so, so much for being with us for this installment of the Welcome Table Talk. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Gavin for some final announcements, but thank you all to our audience as well for joining us. And again, thank you, Ajanaé and DaMaris. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Good evening. This is, oh my goodness. I could be here another 3 hours. This was so stimulating. Thank you, DaMaris. Thank you, Ajanaé. Amanda, you are an amazing moderator, honey. I tell you. Thank you for reminding us that love is just showing up. Toni Morrison said, Ajanaé, it is sheer good fortune to miss someone long before they leave you. That's love. DaMaris, I tell you, those young people at Morgan have a gift in you because you're going to love them hard.
Oh,
And because
absolutely.
you're going to say to them, I love you enough to tell you there's another way other than hate. So this is
I
so
think I'm already
stimulating.
getting on their nerves, those poor children.
Yeah, but just what Amanda said about if you love these young people, you want to gear them to books and libraries and opportunities. There's so much that's negative out here. You all have made me happy in my spirit. You want me to tell you about love? I've been married to a man for 58 years, and he's been my sweetheart for 62. Now, I can tell you about that kind of love, but that's a love, it's not just romantic, it's a friendship that's been enduring. That's what I want for everybody. But the whole thing is, we can do this if we keep the love of the divine in our minds. It is really refreshing to hear you women talk about your faith. Now, that's not on the script. I'm supposed to thank our pro bono AI interpreters. Thank you so much, Christina Monson, and thank you, Amber Mora. You all are wonderful. You're beautiful in your creativity. That's divine as well. Thank you all for being here with us at this Welcome Table Talk. And look for other Welcome Table Talks to come early in 2026. And also look at the chat to see all of the websites. Go to the Torch website, go to the Wintergreen website. You ought to see our new newsletter. It's absolutely gorgeous. So, do all of that. I am really, really touched by all of the sincerity and the revelations that you have given, but most of all, the love that you've shown us by giving of your own knowledge and your creativity. So thank you. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Have a wonderful night, and we'll see you next time.